gas, and that $1.38 had turned into like 800 some odd dollars.
There's a story of a guy on the very early parts of Bitcoin had tens of thousands, and he paid
Yeah.
a pizza delivery guy in Bitcoin what now would be millions of dollars for his delivery because he
Yeah.
didn't have the cash.
Yeah, that's one of those, like, a dollar 38 turns into 800.
Yeah,
It's like, God, why didn't I have like $50 left over?
My little brother did that with Dogecoin. Threw in like $200 as a joke.
Mm-hmm.
And hey,
What did he cash out with? A couple thousand?
yeah, a couple thousand.
Yeah.
But it happened so fast. It went from $200. I think he walked away with $8,000 or something. In
Yeah.
like less than 6 months.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. Rick Buffkin's here early.
Then in your the former founder of dealer.com, Mark Bonfigli or whatever, isn't he really big in Bitcoin? Like shit ton of money or something?
I don't know. Mark probably invented it. I do like Mark's airplanes, though. His sexy jets.
Yeah, I think he sold one of them.
He did something like that, and I know that he's been expanding the fleet. So I haven't seen as many posts on Facebook, and that's what I kept up.
Yeah,
with.
he used to post a lot with his sexy jets and his crypto. I haven't seen as much here lately.
Yeah.
Probably because crypto took such a hit.
I don't know. Mark's one to never stay idle for long.
I'm sure.
I mean, if Bitcoin keeps going where it's going, it'll be back at its peak here.
All right.
So.
Yeah. Took a nice little jump here this morning.
Along with Ethereum and all the altcoins, all of them follow the same pattern, more or less.
Pretty much. Yeah, I think we're scraping 49,000 right now.
All right, 5 seconds, guys.
It was down around 30. Boosh.
All right. Now we're fully here.
Friday.
Yeah, so Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Bonfigli's. These are all fun stories.
Sounds like a coin, Bonfigli's.
You know, it does. I gotta ask a question though before we get started. So I noticed, John, and when we were pulling photos for the opening screen, the promotional image we do, you've got a nice updated image. Nice driven data background. It's all the right colors, all that.
Takes pride.
Yeah, and then somebody else has got a J.C. Penney portraits.
Ryan. No, Ryan, we have a new one. They didn't use the new one.
Alex, I barked up this tree before, so yeah, I do have a new one. It just got done in July, or late July, early August.
Did you do that one at the JCP?
No,
portraits?
Glamour shots, man.
Glamour shots, yep.
Olin Mills.
Oh, okay. All right.
No feather boas, though.
Alex pointed that out to me yesterday. I was laughing for about 5 minutes straight.
I'll message our person responsible for that right now.
Well, we take those from LinkedIn, so.
Yeah, that's you.
The LinkedIn one, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, I just haven't updated it yet.
He stays off LinkedIn as much as he possibly can.
Yeah.
Well, you're up there today.
I thought maybe it was put on there on purpose. Like, there's no way he's got a J.C. Penney portrait That's got to be someone messing with them, putting it on there as an overlay. Is it legit?
I forgot to update my LinkedIn. Actually, that's the only reason why is I do have the new portrait. I just haven't updated it. Yeah, good catch.
But you're not answering the question. It truly is a J.C. Penney's portrait photo.
Yes.
Okay.
The one that's current.
100%.
The new one.
The new one is
slightly better
much higher
than
caliber.
Yeah.
Although I will say my J.C. Penney one is a remarkable improvement over what was there before.
Oh.
The old one was a cell phone in front of a brick wall.
So, ladies and
nice.
gentlemen, may we introduce Ryan Moore, who is actually a developer at heart, and if you know anything about developers, they certainly aren't thinking about what their portraits look like.
Absolutely not.
They're thinking about more important things.
Yeah. Hence why they go to J.C. Penney's for their portraits.
Correct.
So,
That doesn't mean that you're not
Ryan, this is your first Refresh Friday.
Yes, it
And
is.
I know the
welcome
community
aboard.
knows Berna,
Thank you.
so he doesn't need much of an introduction. But we would like to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a
Sure.
little bit about what brought
who
you
is
here.
Ryan Moore?
As you already said, my name is Ryan Moore. I'm the CTO at Driven Data. I've worked in IT since high school. It's just technology's been a passion for me. I've worked from the system admin networking side to software engineering and experience. Got a good experience across the board, and it's just a passion for me. And then in my free time, I usually have some sense of technology involved in my free time. Whether it's 3D modeling or anything like that. And then outside of that, I do try to disconnect every once in a while, golf and things like that, spending time with family. So,
Well, welcome, Ryan.
thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, we got the datas here today. And the big question is it data or datas?
Datas.
Data. Data.
Data.
What's plural?
Data.
Data.
What's singular?
Data.
All right. Well, that's it for the show today.
Okay. We're the same.
Perfect.
Berna, you were supposed to be on more often than what you are. You're the DR
Even
truth.
This last few months has been pretty intense for Ryan and I.
Why?
Ton of stuff. So we raised some money and have expanded the operations. So we're just at about 50 employees now. But when Ryan came on in 2018, joined the band, the boy band back then, and there was only 3 of us actually back in 2018. And so we've seen it together through literally every piece of all the good, all the bad. We've kind of seen it from very early 2018 when he came on until now. But recently, going from about 25 to 50 people this year is brutally complicated. So hiring 20, 25 people, all working remote in basically 60 to 90 days. And I've hired quite a few people before, not like that. That was since hundreds of interviews. We probably had close to 15,000 applications to go through. So it was quite an intense burst we've just gone through.
So that's kind of contrary to what's being said out there. It's hard to find employees right now. And you had 15,000 applications.
Yeah, I guess depends on what you're doing, and I guess the industry and the type of business that you have. I think what we do is a little bit unique. The quality of life and compensation and vision of what we're working on and the people that we work with together, that combination is kind of, I think, what generally people want to be a part of something that's special and do something with people that care. And you know, nobody cares like Ryan does, and I think I do, to do what we have to do every day to make this a little bit better. Who is this Chad Collins guy?
He's the dealer refresh sponsor for Auto Encabulator Marketing, and they have some really good cupcakes.
Sounds like an interesting dude.
He is.
So, John, you guys went from 3 original, and you just hired 25 plus over the last 90 days. What's the total of employees right now?
Just at 50. Yep.
Okay.
So we're
and
in
you're
18
looking
states.
forward to
Yeah.
you're looking forward to the onslaught of additional resumes on October 1st.
What's special about October 1st?
Oh, that's when I believe OnlyFans is making their new change.
So you're going to apply, is
for-
what you're saying. So you're going to apply on October 1st?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's my side
Alex
gig.
sent me the channel, dude. It's just weird. He's like, he sent me the link and I didn't know who it was. And then I get there, I'm like, that's wrong. I recognize your hair.
On the serious side, we don't have an issue getting applications. That's not the hard part. The hard part is getting to the ones that matter and the ones that have a chance or have the qualifications. And so that's been the part that we focused on, is building that funnel down, more specifically down toward the bottom when you're selecting, because getting applications, that's easy.
So we do something actually pretty cool. I think very few companies do, and Alex, I know you're starting to do it now. We have a blind assessment process. So when somebody applies, we don't know their name, gender, what school they went to, where they live. We don't know any of that. We choose to interview somebody, and then it reveals, and that removes all the hiring manager's bias. Like, sometimes we want people that live closer to us or that have gone to certain colleges or are male versus female. And that's a problem because it stops you from finding the best candidates. And so you remove all those kind of individual biases and you focus specifically on like what is going to be the right fit for the role. You do that actually. And so I think it's probably like less than 1% of companies have a blind assessment process. And it's been the most, I would say, important aspect of our process in hiring. So
I'm glad
I
you
didn't
brought
realize
that up.
that was still allowed.
Well, and John, I'm glad you brought that up. Just before we launched the show, we just put our listing up for another engineer at Frickin' Tech, and you all sold us on this process.
yeah, we're like, you should do this.
And
It's amazing.
we've hired 2 people from it so far, and those 2 candidates we probably never would have hired if we met in person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, our biases were so much in the way, and they've come on board and they've been producing within days of starting and just continually getting better and better and better. And again, like I said, if we hadn't been blind to them initially,
Yep.
we never would have hired them.
That was the shocking thing for me, is how much that process raised the quality of hires. Like, we've hired some people that I would have, like, if John had told me we're going to hire people of this caliber, that's absolutely good luck finding them, for starters. And then 2, it just getting them through the process and getting them onboarded. And I have just been shocked at the quality of hires we've had. And the same thing, like, day 1, set up your computer, day 2, go. And it's just been amazing.
Yeah, and any company can do this too. Like, it doesn't matter for a software company, marketing company, dealership group. Having a blind assessment process focusing on the actual skills that you want and what are the kind of prerequisites for that hire, you can do that in any industry. It's harder
I
in
don't,
certain industries, but you can do it.
Alex. I don't
So
know
what do
if
you
you
do?
guys have.
Do you put the potential employee? Do you put them through like an anonymous process in the very beginning where you're not
Yeah.
asking for particular information? Is
They
sort of
submit
like
it, it
a
just doesn't
question.
reveal it to us until we say we
Yeah.
want to interview them. So typically the where most bias occurs in the hiring process is in interview selection. Hiring selection is a second issue, but after you've done an interview, you're less biased towards a person, right? And we all have a
Mhm.
bias in one way or another. But when you humanize it and you've already done an interview, it totally changes the entire perspective.
So when we were putting our current application up, the Tom Harsha, who anybody who knows Tom will know that he is one of the most open-minded and fair individuals you'll ever meet. He's
Yeah.
always thinking of the other person, not himself. And he didn't realize how biased he was. This has been a huge epiphany for him, and it's changing the way that he's looking at how he hires people from forever. So, thank you so much for introducing us to that driven data team. I think a lot of that Keith was a
Well,
big help in that too.
you were mentioned dealerships or dealer groups could probably leverage that as well. How would if they want to go down that route? Is there a specific service that provides that, or is it in house, or what?
Yeah, so there's definitely a number of companies that do this. I'm happy to, promote the company that did it. We don't have any like connection to them other than it's awesome. So it's just called career.place is the website. And basically like any dealership could do this though. Like, so I think the first thing is like having a clear understanding of like what makes a successful person in that role. You have to do that first. And the better you do that, the easier it is to kind of manage the process. And then in terms of if you're going to choose to interview somebody, it should be based on those items that you care about. These other things are just not a factor. If somebody has long hair or short hair, how does that matter? And I'm using hair as an
Yeah, it
example, but
should.
really, you know, it's that crazy that it shouldn't matter. Like, just go for the stuff that matters.
Hmm.
And so when you choose to interview somebody, most of that is happening in an online way, anyways. It's not like you're physically going through paper applications. Every dealership's managing this digitally, setting up appointments, phone interviews initially first in some cases. You know, you can do that all before the person walks in the dealership for their actual interview.
Hmm. Makes sense. Hey Ryan, would it be possible can you turn your ceiling fan off? I know I'm getting a lot of feedback from it. Maybe others aren't. And if others aren't, then don't worry about it.
Oh, I was wondering what was making that noise.
Yeah.
You're gonna make him
Or
sweat
it comes
now.
in waves. Is it that hot? He's got a remote. Sweet.
So, also, there's a great tip right there. There's a
Thank you, sir.
place to hire, and the secret's out of the bag. I was hoping you wouldn't give that up, John. But
Just do it. I mean, just do a blind assessment process. You know, because you're going to get higher qualified people. That's why you should do it.
yeah, you'll thank John later. It's work.
Well,
though. Don't get him
And we have
wrong. Like,
to back
you
up.
got to put some upfront labors into this.
Yes. I mean, we just 15,000 applications. We hired 25 people that are just absolutely amazing. And so we couldn't have done that. There's just no way we could have done that any other way than, we wouldn't have been as successful. No way.
Mm-hmm.
But cool. So what else are we talking about?
Well, that definitely wasn't the topic that we were
I know. We got all
going to
these
be
other
talking
topics.
about, but
So, why don't we start with one thing from the list here that stood out for me? I didn't realize how much of this was still going on. But customer information just getting willy-nilly emailed around to vendors or whoever.
banks.
That's just effing dumb.
Yeah, so this is crazy. We we ask this question in you know, every time we're talking to a new customer, we'll ask like, how do you do this, right? Or how often do you do this? And it's, basically, monthly or quarterly, and it's essentially sales data, service data, and CRM data that's emailed, as a Excel attachment, um, to various companies. And this is absolutely crazy. Like, this is such a bad idea. Number one, to have
So
it be
you're
that.
so you're saying if a dealership's signed up with a new vendor and it's some type of you know consumer, maybe it's some type of marketing campaign, they're pulling the list out of their CRM and they're just emailing that list to this new vendor that they're working with in order to target specific customers. That's the type of email list that you're referring to, and it's just a really dumb idea, and you can go into why.
Exactly. Ryan's going to fight this fan here
Okay,
in a second.
That fan's
I
not
know.
turning off.
It's got its own. You had it. Never mind. It's never stopping. It's got a mind of its own. Yeah. So it's for whatever, and like, there's so many different reasons that this
Very good.
happens to satisfy all these things. Dude, it's not stopping. It's At this point, you're gonna have to fight
So I
it.
can't get it to turn off, but I don't think that
This
was
is
what's
what we
causing the
came to
noise.
see. Is Ryan doing?
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
is it still there? The noise still there, Jeff?
I can't hear it.
Uh,
It was my air conditioning, which I
So,
turned off
okay.
with the remote.
Okay, that's what it
Oh
was then.
yeah.
Yes,
And
it
you
is
got
hot
the
up here.
fan, you got AC going.
Yep. I'm up
so
at the top of the house, so all the heat
Okay.
comes up here.
Yeah,
And it's
that's what
just
it was. The sound's gone now. I just figured it was the fan.
but yeah, it's all these reasons that, different companies need this information to do their jobs, right? Sometimes it's as like simple as like, hey, we need to upload this list into this other product to, satisfy this marketing campaign or whatever, right? And we've kind of just like, for as long as I can remember, just taken for granted that that's like something that you can do. That's not
Hmm.
okay. Like, this is a huge problem, and we've seen a lot of scenarios where, loose processes of this customer data has led to some real issues. And,
Like what?
um, well, obviously, people getting hacked, personal data ending up in the wrong place. It's a liability because this is the dealership's customer data, and it's just all of a sudden could go to some place that it's not supposed to go. And, so, who has access to this information and how it's being distributed? This is probably happening in terms of conversations in dealerships today. Like, there's some restrictions on this, but, from our conversations, I can tell that there's hardly any.
Do you have any examples of maybe times where this went wrong?
All you have to do is look at like customer data hack, search, and you're going to see it. Dealerships have a ton of
Okay.
data. Think about it too. Like, um, we we obviously kind of have a good idea of the averages here, but we have a calculation that we do for our database, which is has to do with, how many columns of information and how many rows of information. And so,
Hmm.
if you multiply the fields by the rows, you can get data points. So you kind of can multiply the two together. For our dealerships, we have about 36 million, and that's an average across, different sizes. And dealerships have
Hmm.
slightly more because we don't take in everything, so they're going to have more than that. So sitting in every dealership's kind of one dealership between inventory, sales, service, CRM, accounting, we're talking probably somewhere around 50 million data points, if not more. And they have people there that are, or, partners, consultants, whoever, that are exporting that, sending it out through email. And that's just like literally this, not a smart thing to do.
How would you? Is there? what would be the alternative? Is
Yeah.
there a
So
better
Ryan,
way
you
to
add
transmit
some
that data?
color add some color to that just from a security standpoint, and then like obviously like how should this work? You know?
So we do a lot of things that you could potentially share customer data through to make it easier. For example, marketing through Facebook and Google. Um, but we even still we've managed to working with them and other partners to we don't share customer data in any way, shape, or form. Customer data never leaves in a readable or even decryptable fashion outside of our application. What a lot of the providers do that works well is a hashing technique where I hash on my end, which is a one-way encryption, and then they hash on their side. And if they have the same hash, that's the same data. If they don't have that hash, then they don't have that data, and they just it's useless to them. So
Hmm.
that's how we communicate PII is if they have already have that data set and they own it, they have rights to it. In the case of Facebook, you gave them your data, right? So they have it by your authorization as a customer. And we have it on behalf of the dealership because you gave it to the dealership. We match that through the hash. And then they can see, okay, yes, we have John Doe or Jane Doe or whatever the case is. Um, that's how that works. And in other means, like if that's not applicable, you of course have just an endless list of encryption techniques, even email. You know, with Office 365 and Outlook, it's just a little lock you click and it encrypts your email for that person, and you can restrict it to not be allowed to be forwarded. Not that you should be using email, but there's a lot of stuff that people just don't use, or I would say are unaware of is available to them.
Yeah, I would say unaware of. I didn't.
Probably.
I mean, I don't use 360, but I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. So like our perspective on this is like regardless of whether you partnered with us or not to do this, and obviously we do this, dealerships have to really start putting in some new policies on how this stuff gets handled. And they're
Hmm.
going to, there's so many things that are bad that can happen from this that we can't even possibly think about, whether it's ransomware or whatever, where these
Yeah.
lists are used against the dealership's interest, or in a way that makes customers upset towards them. And there's real liability. And cybersecurity insurance is expensive. Um, it's not a cheap thing for dealerships that have to pay for this. They have to because they have data. And so, not having these practices in place and you proving that you do have them in place could actually lower your insurance as well.
Yeah, what kind of
So,
coverage
literally save
do
you money in two ways by implementing these practices.
John? There's some dealer groups that will require a vendor to carry certain cybersecurity coverages.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah, what's that typically? What's that dollar amount per instance usually?
So, they're going to look at it usually as probably between professional liability and cyber, somewhere in the range of 5 million to 10 million typically, depending on the situation,
Yep.
depending on the level of deal.
Yep.
And
Have
risk.
you
I've
heard of
seen it
any?
as low as a million. I've never seen it
Have you
less than
heard
a
of any?
million though.
Oh my god.
You all right, Jeff?
Hmm. We're gonna get like a button that goes up.
Raise your
Who
hand.
wants to talk?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Um, have you heard of any dealerships that have been hacked for sensitive customer information? And also, I haven't heard of it, but I'm surprised that we've never heard of any of our industry CRMs being hacked.
So the industry's definitely been hacked. I mean, there's been, plenty of, and I'm not going to go through story by story and name companies because that's not my job to do. And I definitely don't want any heat. But yeah, that's definitely happened. And I think a lot of them probably aren't reported for a lot of reasons. So most things like most ransomware attacks today are unreported. So I think like last year it was like 360 billion. Well, how much was it in ransomware? 360 million. 360
Hmm.
million in ransomware attacks that were reported. So it's more than that, right? Because why would a company that's paid the bounty, why would they publish? They don't have a public incentive to put it out there if they've handled it and it's already gone away. So there's a lot. Most of these probably are unreported.
Well, the other
Yeah,
side is Homeland Security, and this is a rumor I heard, but Homeland Security won't even look at it unless it's more than $5 million in ransom ask.
okay. Well, I mean, you have all this like a dealership or a local business. Like I have a family member that has had ransomware lock their entire business down twice, and called me to help them, and I actually was able to remove the ransomware and reverse it and recover it. Shockingly, it was not a very good ransomware, and so I told him, "Here's what you're going to do to protect yourself." Uh, so a couple of years later, it happened again, and I go in there and I said, "Well, did you do what I asked?" And they said, "No." So I removed the ransomware and stuff without having to pay the ransom, and got their data back and everything. And but they didn't report it. I didn't report it.
But let's just start with who's asking for this, right? The companies that are asking dealerships to email a customer list, they're just as guilty
Hmm.
here.
Oh
You
yeah,
can't
for sure.
you can't do that anymore. And if you're at a dealership and somebody asks you to email a list, they don't know what they're doing. Like that is not how it should work. And if they're asking for that, like you should really ask yourself, like, do they have an honest protocol in place to protect that? Because if that random person at that place is asking for this has it on their email, that means they have it privately too. So
Hmm.
that's crazy. Like they shouldn't be asking that question. If you're a
And
dealership and you hear that, like that's a huge red flag.
and dealerships need
Well,
to
a
be
couple.
making sure they're vetting the vendors as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was like a couple weeks ago, John. You reached out to me and asked me to email you a list from our CRM. Why did you do that?
The dealer refresh theorem. No.
Yeah.
No, no, no. No, we don't
So
have to.
I think another issue is dealerships typically run on outdated hardware, outdated software. I mean, you could walk into any random dealership and they're probably still using, Internet Explorer browser. They're still using, Windows 2000.
Which kind of,
Uh,
again, I think they're ripe for this kind of, and it's like some of
yeah.
this stuff is just most of the time the number one cause for this stuff is just being unaware or stupidity. Like it's not like there's people are people intentionally attacking dealerships, absolutely, because they have the financial means to pay ransoms. They have the
Hmm.
customer data that is significant, and clearly we've seen it on the OEM side, where this data is been misplaced and stuff. So um, yeah, I think it's something that Brian and I feel strongly about, and there's an ethics and a more morality to it for us for how we maintain and manage this stuff. That I always kind of joke with Ryan. The question I ask him is like, imagine it's more motors where you can get more without spending more, right? And
Hmm.
how would we act if this was us? And that kind of guides the decision making.
There's a great question. I'm going to throw it up on the screen about Authenticom. What do you think of their distribution methods with customer information?
Yeah, so we use Authenticom. They've been kind of one of the only data providers in the industry that does this, and they have a huge um, part of the supply chain of making this information available for the industry. They have to do a crazy amount of work to both collect, aggregate, and provide. They go through a security process. It's Ryan can talk to the security side of it more specifically, but I'll say that they have a much higher bar that they have to manage their process to than any dealership would ever. Like any dealer group in the company in the country does not operate with the same level of kind of, you know, vision and capacity that they would, because that's all they do. And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think they're definitely a good example of somebody that can prove that you can do it securely. And they've kind of like, obviously in the EMS space, they've been challenged on that and they've had to prove that it's secure, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mhm.
um,
So
yeah,
Ryan, you touched on this, but just maybe again with layman's terms, the dealership signs up with a new, uh, marketing agency. They want the dealership to grab particular customers out of their CRM and send it to them. You just said something about PII, but just for someone such as myself that's not familiar with all that, what would be the best way to send that information over? Is there like is I would Dropbox be sufficient? I
true.
wouldn't think
Through Jeff's
so.
OnlyFans account.
So there's a
We can give
couple
that a
of key
shot.
there's a couple of key philosophies that people need to keep in mind. So for those who aren't familiar with the acronym PII, just means personally identifiable information. Um, there's the transmission of the data, and then there's the storage of the data. And so typically in software and engineering, they refer to as in rest and in transit. So when your data is in rest, it needs to be encrypted. So Dropbox and OneDrive and all those, they do have mechanisms to encrypt data. Windows 10, for example, you can encrypt a folder on a cloud drive or on your local drive within Windows 10 without any extra tools. I think it's called BitLocker. And then
Okay.
there's additional tools, more advanced tools that you can get to encrypt the data. That's a little more complicated, more advanced. So the first thing you would want to make sure is that if it is sensitive information, regardless of whether it's you know high level sensitive information or it's really detailed, social security numbers and things like that, that when it's being stored, whether you are storing it or a provider is storing it, that it is encrypted at rest. And then secondly, when it's in transit, there's multiple layers and techniques for encrypting data. Take a very basic transaction that everyone does every day. When you go to a web page, your transmission of that web page, even though it's likely not going to be like if you're on a news site, there's nothing sensitive coming through there, but even that is encrypted during transit through TLS, SSL, HTTPS, all that stuff. So then when you're transmitting data, like when we get data from our providers, from different providers have different techniques. Through an API, the API connection is encrypted and the payload is encrypted. And then when we get it, we store it in an encrypted way. And then when we process it, it's encrypted. So from a dealership perspective, I would make sure that your provider understands the terms in transit and in rest, and or when they're storing the
Mm-hmm.
data and sending the data, that it is encrypted and how is it encrypted, and that they can talk to that. If they can't talk to that, then I would be concerned.
Yeah. There's
From a
most
dealership,
90% it's raw. 90+% of these file stuff is completely unencrypted, completely raw,
Mm-hmm.
and no one's really thinking anything about it.
yep. To answer Rick's question, if I was sending confidential information, for me, it's a one-on-one connection with the person that I'm working with. So, for example, I had to send someone um, my birth certificate recently. So
Mm-hmm.
I made sure that person understood what an encrypted email was, and so I actually encrypted my email and sent it by an encrypted attachment, and then communicated to that person to how to not only open the email but to decrypt the attachment.
Hmm.
So um, it's a personal obligation at some point to understand the techniques. Like there's no one answer. Like I can't say use a BitLocker and share and lock down the security. Because there's millions of ways to do. And to one of the comments in there, encryption is only as good as key is maintained. That's true too. It's incredibly complicated, and it's no surprise that data security is a very large industry. And when you have a good data security guy at a company, they're hard to keep because it's complicated.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Because you have to know how
Yeah.
everything works, right? As well as like how to stop
Yeah.
this stuff.
Mhm.
It's pretty intense.
And like they even have like key vaults to track and keep keys and private keys and other confidential information so that staff doesn't even have access to that.
Yeah.
And then you have rotation patterns to rotate various keys to encrypt and decrypt stuff. It's incredibly complicated, and I understand why this is challenging for everyone.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
can
really
we?
surprised we don't hear about more dealerships being under attack or threatened or ransomware and all that good stuff. You're referring to having someone at the company or at business that understands data security. I mean, you're never going to walk into a dealership and they're going
Right.
to introduce you to their data security manager.
Right. That's
Right.
why we bring it
I
up
mean,
today, though.
Yeah.
We're like,
yeah,
again, and this isn't just for us. Like everyone needs to think about this. We have to, and we have to think about it at a brutally difficult level. But for most dealerships, they have to think about this now, and it's super important that they just start asking those basic questions. Who has access to this? Who can export it? What are the protocols?
Mhm.
Right? Just some basics. Just start there, and you're going to quickly understand. Like, okay, like yeah, we shouldn't let like 30 people in the company have access to export raw data. Like that's just crazy. Like that's going to be your first thing, and then from there you can kind of go down this path of discovery. But there's some like even just implementing some of the basic stuff. That's where most of the issues are going to come up. The high level crazy stuff for one dealership, that's probably not what's necessary. It'd be great, but we know it's not realistic. But just having some basic competency in this stuff is, I think, because we see it like they're dealerships are emailing this stuff and expecting that to be totally cool, and that's the problem.
yeah,
Well, that's really what it comes down to. I think one and take a step back. There isn't going to be a lot of news about a small business getting attacked,
Right.
especially for
Correct.
the little amount of money that's probably less than $5 million
Right.
that's going to be. And also, like there's too many juicy ones. I mean, Rick Buffkin mentioned T-Mobile earlier. You've had
I was gonna
Home
say-
Depot. You've had Equifax. Like those are much more if it bleeds it leads kind of stories than the local
Yeah, you're
car
gonna hear about
dealership.
that. You're not going to hear about a two-store dealer group. You're just not.
Yeah.
And even then, like what level of data was shared? Like not all data is as confidential as the rest. So like if a medical company, for example, got hacked, that's a lot different than us. Like we don't even even gather in. There's no social security numbers, nothing that is at the end of the day incredibly confidential that I wouldn't tell someone if they asked me. So that it's not as likely to be newsworthy in most people's eyes.
And
Mhm.
the primary use case is not nefarious for sharing this stuff. The primary use case is to satisfy a marketing need. That's the primary use case. And on the agenda we have like different things about dealer ads and things, and this all ties into that, right? So if I want to stop having people that just bought a car get served an ad, I have to get this information into that platform. How is that being done
Yeah.
right now? Through Excel.
Mhm.
And that's crazy because it needs to happen
Really?
every day, right? So it needs to happen every day. Dealerships sell cars every day. So you have to do this every day, which means you need to automate it, which means it needs to be secure, which needs to mean you can like think about how to do this the right way versus like I'm just going to once a month email Tony from the marketing company my Excel customer list. Like that can't be the way we handle this. And
And
so
I've done that before. Totally guilty.
totally guilty.
Yep. it's easy to do.
It especially feels safe to do it when you're emailing that list within the same domain. So if you're sending it within the same
Hmm.
company, like Jeff, you were sending it maybe to the Toyota store. You think that that's safe, but
Yeah.
that's not
So yeah,
here.
the use cases for tying this stuff together into this marketing is amazing. Like you can do some magical stuff. Um, but to Julio's point, needs the 100% data integration needs to be real time. Yeah, or as close to real time as possible on a cadence that's real. Right now, it's on whatever the human being's time is of doing it, and it's in most
Hmm.
dealerships it's monthly or quarterly. And that we talk to, definitely not weekly, definitely not multiple times per month. And so if you're going to personalize marketing, you have to make it personal, which means you need personally identifiable information connected to marketing. And so if you're not going to do it through Excel, you're going to have to do it through somebody that's doing it through a hash, that's doing
Yeah.
it automated. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time.
So John,
Quick,
let
quick
me.
shout out to Julio, man. I haven't heard from Julio in a long time.
So John, when you talk about wasted spending because somebody's
Yeah,
marketing to somebody who's already bought a car, and that that's happening in a lot of cases, probably happening forever. Because I know some companies, some really big companies, that don't even look at this old data ever and turn off that marketing.
yeah. So the auto industry is interesting that marketing companies say they're software companies, right? They're trying to be software companies, but it's a totally different frame of mind. Um, and so if you're going to do this, you have to have a persistent integration that's automated and essentially operating daily, right? But what we're talking about here is, let's say somebody services or buys a car from you and they have a question or they're going to pick up their car or whatever, and they search for the dealership online, and of course, based on the paid search campaigns, the dealership's likely going to have some ads show up. Customer does not know the difference in most cases between a paid and organic link. And I know that because what's the number one search term on Bing? It's Google, right? So this is
Oh,
not the
yeah.
average customer that's buying a car. The average customer that's buying a car does not understand the difference between a paid and organic link. They just click what's convenient. And so
Yeah.
if you buy a car, you sell a customer a car. Customer has a question for let's say it's a WIO. Let's say it's a question about how to configure something on the car, and they call or paperwork, whatever, and they call back. Yeah, Drew's talking about they retired for 120 days. I'm gonna talk about that. Um, this customer is gonna in paid search just click on the paid ad. So the first, like when we have a conversation with our prospective customers about this is the first example we talk about audience implementation and marketing and suppression, because it's easy to understand. Like you can say like, yeah, I don't want that to happen. That's dumb. Like I don't want to waste $3 on a dude that I just sold a car to. Like yeah, or service to. And most of the searches, branded searches, are likely going to be for service, not sales. Why? Because there's so much more transaction frequency. The cycle time is so much shorter, and they're still going to visit the website. They're still going to get remarketed. They're still going to click on all these other ads, not just search on paid search or Google, right? So actively suppressing it all the time on this stuff dramatically reduces ad spend. Dramatically. We know this. We wasted our own money to figure it out. We duplicated our campaigns and ran them against recent transaction audiences, and it ended up being about 10 to 15% of ad spend. Um,
Hmm.
and so there's some nuance here. So if you have in your brand name as a city, it's worse, right? So if you're Chicago Toyota versus more Toyota, right? Chicago Toyota, it's worse because you don't have a unique branded term like you would a city. In a geo, you're going to have geo searches hit you much harder. That's just some paid search, but this also affects, as I think Drew pointed out, remarketing. So remarketing audiences are set up where somebody visits the website and they're going to get exposed to an ad for 90 days from a persistent cookie, right? 120 days in some cases. So that cookie has no idea you just bought a car. And it's going to send you that same 2012 Ford Taurus that you had your eye on for 100 days.
Mm-hmm.
And remarketing is cheap, so dealerships do it, and it works. But it's usually set up to run forever almost. And that customer is absolutely exhausted seeing the same ad every single day for the rest of their life. So number one, they
Especially
hate it.
after they made the purchase.
And we all know this, right? We all go on, like, here, you can go on Amazon right now and buy batteries. And the same batteries
Mm-hmm.
that you just bought, you're going to get remarketed to for at least a week or two.
Yep.
And that's the best e-commerce platform on the planet. And your car dealership website is not as sophisticated as Amazon, right? But this active suppression is just a duh thing that it's kind of the first step you take down this personalization journey. So if you can do that, you can stop the remarketing, prevent that click from happening. That means you've essentially gained back 10-15% of your budget that you can spend in places that are actually smart versus these own goal type clicks. I want to force that customer to go through an organic link versus a paid link. I want them not to see that 2012 Ford Taurus that they already own. They already see it in their driveway. They don't need to see it when they go on Facebook.
John, it's reaffirmation. helps me to feel better about my purchase.
Yeah, that was a great car though, right? I usually use Dodge Dart just to get people fired up. I don't know. Of course, that's the one today. But yeah, I think that's the. So if you can think about active suppression as kind of the first step, then you get into some other cool things. So like, well, what if somebody's an active lead in my CRM, and I want to change the rules for paid search, and I want to get a little bit broader. Maybe I want to have broader keyword strategies, or I want to do a bid modifier and bid up if they're an active lead. So if a $1 billion company can't figure out ad suppression, how can we as a dealer? Well, we did, so you can't. It's really hard. There's 100 steps. There's 100 steps from the data getting into the whole process. If you think about it as an entire sequence, it's probably close to 100 steps to do active suppression. So yeah, it's brutally difficult. And that's why I think we're one of the only ones that do it. But that's just step one. Next is, again, actively in the CRM. Shouldn't we change the rules for marketing? Wouldn't you? Or what if, here's another one that's one of my favorite ones. Somebody's in the customer database. We've sold this customer a car before, and they search for one of my competitors or Carvana. Normally, do I bid on Carvana? No. I don't bid on Carvana normally, just for fun because it's expensive, right? And the results are bad. But if one of my customers searches for Carvana, you bet your ass I want to protect myself. And I'm going to change the rules for that because that customer is in a defection situation. And we think about this, like, where are all these Carvana customers coming from right now? They're coming from dealerships. The last car that they bought a car from was not from Carvana. It was from you, right? And so they're in a customer acquisition mode, meaning there's no loyalty to Carvana. Every customer is customer number one for them, frequency of one, right? Now, let's say next year they have 10% of their sales coming from loyalty from prior transactions. Then it goes to 20, then 30, then 40. That's when Carvana becomes an absolute monster. They're already a monster, but they're taking customers from your database right now. So protecting them from defecting is, to me, that is just so important for dealerships. And you should change the rules for your marketing if they're in your database. And it has to affect everything. Search, social, the way that you manage your OTT, the way that you manage any of their campaigns. You just have to think this way.
Everyone is competing with Carvana and Vroom right now. Whether you know it or feel it or see it, you are. Just wait.
Yeah, and you can do everything they can from an experience standpoint, right? You can deliver cars, but their mentality for acquisition, I like to say they're CarMax with an attitude, because I think that's what they are. I mean, they want to go for all of it, not just some of it. And
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. Drew, exactly right. We do this actually. Not quite that aggressive, but yeah, you can do some pretty cool stuff.
You definitely
You know,
need
we'll
to
say
add a
loyalty
WTF to
matters.
your call to action, John.
Yeah, I know, right? But Drew, you're exactly right. We'll change ad copy based on audience participation. Absolutely. So we'll say like loyalty matters at ABC Motors. Get blah 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 as a repeat customer. So yeah, of course, you want to do those things because when advertising is personalized, it makes a huge difference in click through rates. Click through rates lead to website engagement improving as well. So you see kind of like typically quality goes up on the ad. You're going to see quality go up in traffic engagement simultaneously.
Well, I think of the bullet points we were trying to hit on today. The one we haven't gotten anything close to yet is cash for clunkers.
Yeah, I was going to ask that because you
Yeah,
had posted something over on your Facebook page, something about comparing Cash for Clunkers era 2008 to the inventory shortage
yeah,
of what we're experiencing right now.
yeah. I kind of
What are
when this
those?
all happened, when this all kind of initially happened with the supply chain challenges, that was what like I immediately thought of the similarities between the two. My first year in a dealership was during that 2008, 2009, 2010. So I came into it like in the worst time possible. And we would say the name of the dealership. It was a Chevrolet dealership, so it would say like blah 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 Chevrolet. We're here to stay. That was how we answered the calls. The receptionist answered all calls that way, right? Because this is when you're getting letters and dealerships are closing, and so. Um, but I think back, they announced Cash for Clunkers. The program, like if you remember, trying to like report cars for Cash for Clunkers didn't even work for the first few days, and
Hmm.
so the dealers were like, "Let's just sell the cars and we'll figure out how to report them later." And like, it was
Yeah, I remember
crazy
that.
to get because remember it was like the current year in miles per gallon of the car versus the car that they were buying, it was up to $4,500. It was like 4,500 or
Hmm.
3,500, depending on the fuel efficiency of the car that you bought. But you could bring in, you know, a clunker that met whatever the criteria was for the miles per gallon, and you get up to 4,500 bucks. So like we were getting like the crappiest trades ever for like 500 bucks. Like normally, ACV of
Oh
100 goes
yeah.
up to 500, and they're getting 4,500. So new cars like sold out instantly. Like it was like beanie babies on eBay, right? And these things just poof. And all of a sudden, there's no new cars except for all the cars that didn't qualify, and they weren't making cars. And remember, most of the manufacturers had shut down production to almost nothing or
Hmm.
almost a third. There was massive restructuring going on. Capital markets meant they didn't have money to build cars. Customers couldn't get a lease at the time, so there's no new car leasing in most manufacturers. I think it was just about all manufacturers had no new leasing at the time. Maybe a few of them did. Um,
It was definitely the
Subprime
death
credit.
of the balloon. The
What's
last
that?
banks that were still doing balloons
Yeah,
stopped
Yeah.
doing those then. Yep.
subprime loan lending was brutal. If you had bad credit, it was really hard to get done. Um, and so what happened was used car prices went up, and dealerships had to sell used cars. They had to primarily become used car dealerships, which is what's happening right now this year. And
Hmm.
so used car prices went up. The auctions became drier and drier. Quality of the used cars available at the auctions went down because the best ones went for higher prices and right away. And we didn't have the CR like we didn't have the mechanisms to measure the quality of used cars at auctions like we do today. Today, the disclosure and the documentation and the condition reports are so much better than they were 13 years ago, 12 years ago. It was completely Wild West. So you'd buy cars that had blown motors, and obviously there's recourse and stuff, but still, it was a huge challenge to get inventory back then. We started buying cars off the street, like we're doing today. We incentivize people to trade in their cars. Like literally, all this stuff is very similar. What happened to the average age of ownership on a car went way up. Service business started to absolutely boom. Um, Literally, it's the same. The metrics then versus now, you can line them up. They're almost identical. There's a couple things that are different. Obviously, we don't have the credit challenge that we had back then, so lending is not completely sideways. But I would say it's better for dealerships now than it was back then. Obviously, there wasn't a health issue, which is not great and not something that you would say, don't put that in the win column, you know? But these two patterns to me, I remember what it was like there and how perfect we had to operate. And I absolutely empathize for dealerships today. Like they have to be perfect. And that's what's the similarities between these two. And I think if you went through that as a dealership or you were a manager in a dealership in Cash for Clunkers, you became legendary good. Like you learned how to become an amazing operator, and that probably vaulted people's careers having experienced that. There's people in dealerships today, you guys are going to like lead the industry for the next 20, 30 years because you've gone through this incredible challenge. And so that's going to kind of bring, I think, the best out of dealerships long term from an efficiency standpoint.
Well, that's the
It's like
key there, long term. So I always felt like the pain of the recession for dealers, and I was one then too, wasn't long enough for all the business practices to really take hold, because by the time 2003 was here, that was a lot of it was forgotten. You know, people were or 2000 geez sorry 2000 way off there 10 years later, but sorry, by the time things came around in 12, 13, things were back, and it was business as usual again.
Well,
So
what happened too? A bunch of dealerships sold, and a bunch of them became part of groups, and that's what's happening right now. Now, the blue sky for dealerships is not probably proportionate to the revenue that they're getting this year from average gross profits being roughly 4,500 bucks
Mhm.
front and back versus being normally around 2,300, 2,400. They're having record revenue years and trying to get blue sky numbers based on this like shortened supply chain, um, the demand exceeding the supply. And so, yeah, but there's a lot of dealerships that are trying to sell now because they're peak value, like crazy peak value. So we'll see how bold the dealer groups get on paying absolute top price. But back then, that's what happened. Acquisitions just went crazy during the recession.
yep,
Sure did.
it's crazy right now. It's, like you said, it's been amazing to watch some of these large dealer groups get way larger.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, it's expensive to build a new facility. It's expensive to go through all that stuff. So just buying them is, these dealerships are in pretty good shape right now too.
Well,
Very informative,
yeah.
gentlemen. Sure appreciate it. Again, this is something dealerships just aren't thinking about. I know it's not something I think about. Definitely not on a daily basis. And I can't tell you how many times I've exported a list from the CRM from a different program and sent it over to the agency via email, and haven't done it lately, but I've definitely done it in the past. And to know that, that's not a good idea, and there needs to be some solutions out there. I know, Ryan, you touched on a few of them. Are there any more at the tip of your tongue for different simple transactions like that dealerships could jump on quickly just to get that level out of the way?
No, off the top of my head, I'm not sure what I would recommend generally, but I could certainly put something together if dealers, because that's something that they would like some recommendations on. I could absolutely put together a list of techniques, and maybe John, we could put it up on our website as part of our blog, and you know how to keep their data safe on their side. I would be happy to put something together like that.
Yeah, we put
Yeah,
it
you
up on
guys should put something together, get it up on your blog. We'll get it over in the forums, and we'll make it a resource
And
for dealerships to tap into.
and honestly, the number one thing they can do is be aware that they're what's happening.
Hmm.
Like it's all.
Yeah.
I think several people commented about it. It's like the first, I think is like acceptance is the first step or whatever. Like that's
We've got a
like
problem. Yeah.
just being aware that you're doing this is most of the work. After that, you already know what you need to do, and it's just a little bit of research, or there's got to be someone around you that solved it in your particular use case. The problem is, and the reason why I don't have, a top answer is there's so many scenarios. I can't think of one that would apply in all cases. That's the problem.
Yeah.
What may work for
Gotcha.
you may not work for Alex.
Hmm.
Different tools, different use cases. It's complicated. So.
Makes sense.
We get it's kind of
All right, gentlemen.
We get it's kind
What's
of
that?
a little bit of a boring topic, like data security. People's
Yeah.
Yeah, it is sort of. It's
You have to
boring,
think
but
about, like,
it's important.
boring, but just because you think it's boring doesn't mean the risks aren't absolutely the opposite of boring. These risks are not boring, but you're going to get really excited about the risks. You know what I mean? And it happens way more than people know. And I think, we just see this as something that we feel strongly about. And it's like, I asked Ryan what to talk about, and this was the number one thing that we've been trying to educate people on.
Yeah, I've done a lot of fun exercises in my career to help, teach and educate and discover, from hacking, capture the flag events to just conversations with people. So I enjoy this topic. It's a complicated one.
Yeah. Well, from an IT perspective, I can see how it would be a pretty fun topic and field.
Yeah.
Just the field alone to get into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, gentlemen, Alex, anything else? Any other questions?
Oh God, you can go. Anytime I get on a call with Ryan or John, or hopefully in person again. It's been too long.
Yeah, absolutely.
The conversations go for days, not hours. But I do want to extend an invitation to you guys to come back and share some of the amazing data that you guys are starting to graph and better visualize.
Yeah, I'll share a few things on that. So Tuesday we're doing our first webinar that we've ever done, and we kind of do our own thing. Yeah, but no, it's actually only for our customers. The first one's only for our customers, so that's next Tuesday. So we're going to put that on just for our customers first. There's a website that we've made as part of a section of our site that has live stats on a whole bunch of stuff from our aggregated data. So I think we start with about 10 different visualizations. But we're going to continue to add it up to about in the 30s is where we'll probably get it to over the next couple months. But this live stats updates automatically, and it's a aggregated perspective, and it's on some of the metrics that you're not going to see from NADA, you're not going to see from some of these other traditional sources, because we have a wider view given the CRM and inventory and counting CRM. All together. So combining all these together into one, we get to kind of do some pretty cool stuff. So that we will put out and share as soon as it's after Tuesday next week.
Yep.
And then so definitely come back and talk about.
I thought you said there's a page currently on the website that you can access.
We're wrapping it up right now. Yep.
Yeah. So it'll be available probably Tuesday or Wednesday next week.
And it'll
let us know. We'll get that out there.
The page will be live but the reports update every morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time, just for FYI.
And they are encrypted.
Yeah.
Well, it's aggregated statistics, so but yes.
Yeah.
It's a lot of hashes, Jeff.
There's zero.
There's no hashing in the situation, but even the aggregated statistics are encrypted at
It's just
rest.
Excel files. You just go right there and no.
So you'll click a button and it will email it all to you in a raw text file.
Super
Excellent.
simple.
Cool.
Yeah, we'd be happy to come back.
All right, guys.
Yes, thanks for having us on. It was fun.
All right, later, guys.
See
You
ya.
got it. Make it a great week.